know, we're able to make change happen. So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I just know all of us are connected to each other some kind of way. And so that's what it's all about. Just, continue to build that connection. Welcome, Janice. I know you with us a short time, so we're going to get started. We got a few more that's going to come, and so hopefully they'll make it by the time Jay gets started. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to NAWBO Greater Raleigh. And please forgive me because I haven't checked the roster list. So Carlisa, can you help me out? Anybody new? Completely new?
Sharon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think is the only new person.
Okay.
That we have.
Right. And I think Sharon has been with us in another life.
Right. Yeah.
She has, right? Okay, right.
Yeah, I mean, she's not new to NAWBO, but just membership wise.
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure I get it right. I don't want to be messing up stuff. So it's my fault. It's my fault. And I'll take that. Thank you. So welcome everybody. We are excited about Jay speaking, and I'm going to quickly switch over to Carlita. She has some membership information she wants to share. And then I'm gonna switch after Carlita. Janice, you can go ahead and talk about connections and introduce Jay, and we're gonna get this party started, okay? So welcome everyone and thank you. And our president-elect, Miss Emily Parks, is here. So I think I've covered everybody. And Annette is on the board. Carlita's on the board. So I got everybody. All right.
And
welcome.
Becky is our guest today.
Yes. Welcome. Okay. Becky, can we see your face for a second? You and Sharon? I love to see faces. There you go. Thank you. Glad to have you. Thank you.
Hi, Becky.
Becky. Wasn't very dressed up today. I'm like, all right, fine.
It's okay.
But we're so glad you're here. This will be
you have a beautiful smile. So
well, thank you.
Yeah, so Becky, I'll let you know I had a t-shirt on about 5 minutes before I logged in here. And even that was a debate. I was like, I don't know, in these days of Zoom, everybody's so comfortable and relaxed, but
I'm not delivering any training today, so I am
Well, Becky, purple is my favorite color, so that's a plus. Okay, there you go. All right, Sharon, good to see you. Now I know why I know you. Okay. I was like, okay, her name is just okay.
Everybody knows Sharon.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all. Sorry, I joined, but I was trying to wrap up a call on a different computer, so I had my stuff all turned off.
We are glad to have you, and this is going to be good. I'm excited about Jay speaking to us because he has a lot of nuggets to share. So promise to be quiet. Carlita, I'm handing it over to you.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's so good to have everybody here, and I know we've got some other people coming. And I'm going to just give you a couple of brief pointers because I want to certainly to maximize our time for Jay's presentation. But I am Carlita Ward. I am the membership director for NAWBO Greater Raleigh for this year. And we are currently in the midst of our spring membership drive. I think most of us on here are members, but and Becky, I think you said Becky is a guest. So but for the benefit of all of us, because we need everybody involved in finding and identifying and recruiting new members. But we are currently in the midst of our new membership, our spring membership drive that goes through the end of April 30th. And anyone who joins who joins NAWBO between now and the end of April will get a $45 discount on your initiation fee. You have to pay the membership fee, but the initiation fee, which is generally $100, is reduced now by $45 during this membership drive period. So that's a real good inducement for you to consider joining. And anyone who was a former member who decides to reinstate their membership will have their reinstatement fee waived. So, and that's typically, I think, $25. So there's a lot of financial incentives for people to join between now and the end of April. And for those of you who don't know, just a couple of the benefits of joining NAWBO. so let me say, NAWBO is a national organization with a local reach. So once you join you join at the national level, and you are assigned to a local chapter. So when you join, I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of being associated with Greater Raleigh, because that's specifically what we want to focus on here. There's monthly programs such as what we're having today. We have these ongoing programs, educational programs, networking opportunities, mastermind peer groups, and that's something that Janice Cutler's group, Professional Development, facilitates, is helping people who join at the premier level to be assigned or associated with a peer group. We have corporate partnership opportunities. Advocacy is a huge piece. We're apolitical, but we advocate for issues related to women in business. So there's a strong advocacy component to your membership here. Discounts from participating businesses, and then certainly opportunities to develop your leadership skills. We want you to consider being a part of a committee, or raising your hand and say, I'd like to be considered for a board assignment. There's lots of opportunities here for all of the NAWBO members, and we just want to strongly encourage you, if you're not a member, to strongly consider joining. If you are already a member, if you have friends, colleagues, associates that you think would be a good fit for NAWBO, send their information to me. I'll be more than happy to reach out to them. It would be great if you could do a soft introduction, but otherwise just send me the information and we'll be glad to reach out to them. We are really hoping to have a banner membership drive, and we need everybody's help to be able to do that. So thank you so much. And Carnella, I'll give it back to you.
Yes, I'm talking to mute, but thank you, Carlitha. Yes, it takes everybody, and we're doing some great things. My favorite word is phenomenal. We're actually doing some phenomenal things, and I was just reflecting this morning on all the stuff we've done in a year, and it has been amazing. And so you got to tell everybody about us. Tell everybody about us. And the best is yet to come, not just in the organization, but we want that to spill over in your business as well. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Miss Janice, you want to tell them about the other wonderful thing that you all are doing? It's another way to connect. So Janice, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Carnella. And Carlitha, thank you for that lead in about peer groups. I will mention that as well. I am the chair of professional development this year, and I have a couple of people on my committee who do different things. And our job is to connect members and even talk to non-members if they have further questions, aside from what Carlitha can provide. We connect members to resources within Greater Raleigh NAWBO or NAWBO National, and help to plug them into whatever they might be needing and whatever they might not know about. So we make sure everybody knows about the benefits even after they join. And if they want to get connected to a peer group, then we match them up with that. And if they need resources outside of NAWBO, such as community partners, such as SBA or Women's Business Center, or anything else that we know about that might be able to help their business, we talk to them about that as well. So after all this, I'm going to put my email in the chat. If anyone is on here who needs any of those things or has questions, you can definitely reach out to me. And without further ado, oh, I forgot about Connections and Conversations, the real reason Carnella told me to speak. I got carried away with our committee work. So we instituted for this year anyway, and I'm hoping we can continue next year, a new event, and we started in January, and it's once a month, and it's run by the Professional Development Committee, and it's virtual currently. And we get together for 45 minutes once a month on Wednesday. The next one is May 14th, and the information is on the website to register. It is for members only, and it is a no-cost event. And it's just like it says, it's connections and conversations. So we get together, we talk, we have a very brief, literally 3 or 4 minutes, just a couple of slides to thank our partners and any pertinent information, but we don't spend a lot of time on that. And we connect with each other, and then we do breakout rooms depending on how many folks are here, usually 3 to 4 in a breakout room, and we get to know each other better. But we always start off with reminding everyone about any resources and seeing if anybody needs anything. And it's from 9 to 9:45 once a month, the second Wednesday of every month. And this one coming up, May 12th, is our last one for the year. So we would start that off again, assuming the new board takes that event on again in September. So again, I'll put my email in the chat if anybody wants to reach out about that program or anything else that the Professional Development Committee is doing. And I've been in NAWBO a really long time, so I might be able to answer any other questions for you or know who to point you towards. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker today. Thank you for being here, and I might have to jump off after a little bit for a work thing. So Jay, welcome. Just to tell you a little bit about Jay, or a lot, he's done so many great things. I did have to cut some of it out, but I think I got the high points here. Jay is the founder and CEO of Pathfinder Business Consultants, where he and his team help business leaders develop diverse and high-performing organizations. In addition to leading Pathfinder, he is a partner in several entrepreneurial ventures and small businesses. Before establishing Pathfinder, Jay was the Vice President of Sales for the U.S. Roche Diabetes Care Division, where he was responsible for leading all field sales and sales operations functions. During his career at Roche, Jay developed leadership and mentor programs for new managers and senior leaders. He has spearheaded the establishment of a formal diversity and inclusion program spanning over 3,000 employees, optimized talent recruiting and retention, resulting in lower turnover, and implemented cultural change, resulting in organizational excellence and increased profitability. Jay began his professional career in 1998 as an intelligence officer in the United States Army. He held multiple leadership positions and global deployments in the Army. As a counterintelligence officer, Jay was trained on behavioral science methodology that he later incorporated into his transformational leadership philosophy and mentorship programs. A native of Raleigh, Jay earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Military Science from North Carolina State University and an MBA from the Kennan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So welcome, Jay, and we look forward to hearing all you have to teach us today.
Well, thank you. And I really need to figure out how to cut my bio down. I really apologize for that. Are there any questions?
Oh, you've done so much. I mean, I loved reading all that. I mean, I didn't want to cut any of it, but it's wonderful. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm really excited to be here. Thanks, Carnella, and to the leadership team here for inviting me. With such a small group, I actually enjoy these smaller discussions. I definitely want to make sure that this is conversational. So I do have some slides. I figured being around lunchtime, in the middle of the week, in the middle of the month, that it would be great to just condense it down to about 60 slides or so, and maybe just lots of words so that we were all really, really having a good time together. So let me share my screen real quick. And can everybody see that okay?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is building high performance organizations through diversity. And I guess just to kind of take a step back, my own kind of personal reason for getting into diversity. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is not too far from here in Raleigh, where I'm at today. And I grew up in an interracial family. My mom's white, my dad's black. At the time in the early 70s when they got married, it wasn't cool here still in North Carolina to be particularly interracial. That was actually worse than just straight white, black, ethnic lines back then. They couldn't even get married in the county that they lived in. They had to go find a small courthouse in Chapel Hill, actually, that was a bit more, I guess, open-minded. to allow them to get married. And, you know, so I guess for me, diversity started from an early age. It's really tough for me to find acceptance in any group. With my white friends' families, I was this black kid coming in, and not all of them were great about that. To my black friends, when I went over to their families, I wasn't black enough sometimes. So it was really, really tough, but it was a lot of lessons learned for me personally. Not to kind of be dramatic here, but the first time I heard the N-word was in second grade. And it was a kid that was saying it to me, and I was kind of a rough and tumble little kid, and I ended up fighting him, and I'm the one that got suspended and got in trouble at the time. So that's actually when I first realized that I didn't realize that it was like kind of like social justice, but that's the first time that I realized something's not right here, and that became a real passion. And then of course, with kind of fast forwarding, things got a whole lot better. Particularly when I got into college, people were more open-minded. I did go to NC State for my undergrad, and with that, my first dorm room, I had a Muslim person, I had 2 black people, my roommate was white, and I had 2 people from like deep Mount Airy, North Carolina, if anybody knows Mount Airy. You know, they didn't see a lot of black folks coming in. And so we ended up forming just this really cool group of friends where we would ask open questions, and they asked a lot of questions of me. And I really enjoyed kind of imparting at least my viewpoint of the world and fairness, and meeting each other as humans versus meeting each other as, you know, a race, a gender, a religion, or anything else. And then when I went into the military, while the military there is certainly racism in the military, they really do preach though that you're all together, you're all one team, and you look beyond that. And so culturally, I would see a lot of people that maybe came from backgrounds that were different start to really come together. And so that just kind of I just wanted to share a little bit of a background why this is so incredibly personal to me. And then in the introduction, Janice, thank you. When I got to Roche, really large organization, biotech organization, I was really excited because I thought there would be a veterans group. I thought there would be African-American group, LGBT. I thought there would be a diversity groups, and there was nothing. They didn't have anything. And so after spending a couple years there, I started to raise my hand and say, you know, we don't have a lot of diversity. And so they started a women's initiative, which was great. I was on the board, I volunteered, I was like, anything that I can do to help. And so we started doing that initiative, but we still didn't have a true diversity program. And so a couple of veterans and I got together and we said, look, we're gonna start this grassroots. You know, this is a $20 billion business. Like they're going to have to listen to us at some point and invest in diversity. And so we started our about a month before Veterans Day. We said, look, we're going to have a big bang. And the leadership team was kind of like, yeah, we'll see what you're going to be able to accomplish. And we ended up having about 400 people show up. The mayor, the governor showed up, and we had the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, which anybody knows anything about the military, that's the highest level person in the armed forces, reports directly to the president, flew in and talked about the importance of diversity. Well, of course, the leadership kind of pushed us aside and took all the photo ops and everything else, but I didn't care because I knew that would get the ball rolling. And that's when we started to really invest in diversity. And we started to grow in our business, and we started to do a lot better. Our turnover went down, all these benefits, right? So that's when I started to really see the power of it. And then it led to the formation of Pathfinder, because I woke up every day and I said, this is what I want to do. And so that's what kind of led me here today and talking to you. And with such a small group, please, if you guys have any questions or any comments or anything, please just feel free to jump in. I hate to talk at people. It's more fun if we can interact. But this is the way I kind of look at the world. You know, we spend a lot of time in our business strategy. We look at our results, but a lot of times we forget this middle piece, which is about our people. And people is what makes things happen, right? I mean, Carnella, you know, you mentioned, you know, networking and everything else. I mean, this is connecting people and connecting humans so that we can share what I call our superpowers to do really great things. And unfortunately, a lot of companies, they understand this, but they don't put a lot of resources around it. Certainly not as much as they put around the business strategy, typically in corporations. And in particular, diversity, equity, inclusion. I always tell people this is such a important pillar to your organization. If you're not looking at this, you really need to, because of all the wonderful things that a diverse organization can do. And I'll share a couple of thoughts on that. Again, I don't want to be a parade of PowerPoint here to everybody, but I thought that I would just share some information, and then we can have a discussion. But just a little bit of data. So the power of diverse organizations, and interestingly enough, this isn't new information. This is one of the things that sometimes baffles me. Is I think when you see this, any one of us would say, this is the type of organization we would want to work in. Yet we let a lot of companies still really struggle here. But what we find typically is gender diversity increases profitability by about 21%. Who would not want to increase their profitability by 21%, all right? Gender and ethnic diversity increased profitability by 33%. So when you look at both gender and your ethnic mix in your organization, it's even more of a force multiplier. Diverse boards are 43% to be higher profitability than their non-diverse counterparts. As I was saying earlier, you increase your employee engagement, you lower your turnover, and you have better innovation versus your peers, and then you have higher customer satisfaction. So I don't think if any of us would look at this and take this to our leadership, or if we are business leaders and said, we don't want any of this. Like, I don't think any of us would say that, right? So again, this is where sometimes things would kind of baffle me as to why we're not doing better. And so some of the things that I found why companies really struggle, or why organizations struggle or fail at DE&I, are leaders are cautious. They're concerned they're going to do it wrong. So this is something that I hear a lot of times when people finally do want to reach out, is they'll say, I don't want to mess anything up. And I really appreciate that. I mean, that means that their heart's in it, but they're just nervous. And right now, one of the things that I really try to do is make sure that we're not polarizing anybody when we're having these diversity discussions, right? I mean, being an interracial person, I sometimes worry a little bit about how much we talk about privilege and how much we talk about some of these areas, because we need individuals who are in positions of power to be advocates and be champions, so that we can move the needle in this area. Another thing is people don't know where to start. And so I think they realize we need to do something, but we don't know where to start. And so they kind of let that just stop their progress. And then lack of resources, kind of going back to Roche. I mean, this is the largest biotech company in the world. They certainly would have no problem cutting a multi-million-dollar check for market research or something like that. But to turn around and ask for $10,000 for diversity, you would have think I was, asking for everybody's firstborn, until they really understood the power of diversity. And then there's an apathy. Oh, yeah, Sharon, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to ask Jay if over the years, but really, let's drill down to it. Since last summer, have you seen much more openness and I mean, business leaders all over the country, organizations small and large, have realized the huge gaps that they've had, that they have not had DEI? And have you seen a lot of inbound inquiries to now let's get something started?
Sharon, I absolutely have. And one of the things that really, I will say, kind of discouraged me at first when I started my company is, as I was kind of explaining the wheel in the middle, right? Those are all the areas that we look at. And I would say, though, a real clear area that we want to focus on is diversity. People would say, yeah. If you can just lower my turnover, help my leaders, work with my executive team, that would be great. And they would really just gloss over the diversity piece as much as I would try to push it. But once the George Floyd murder happened, and now it's officially a murder. So then that is when people started to reach back out and say, okay, I
Yeah.
know you mentioned diversity before. And, you know, it's sad that it took something like that to trigger that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's when I think across the country, we started to see this discussion, right, around social justice and around what companies can do. You know, I think all of us on this call are business owners, right? So the reason why I like working with businesses is because, you know, it's a population of employees, but then you have their families and then you have their extended network. And so if you can influence 10, 20% of this organization, the ripple effect is huge. And so, you know, yeah, that's when I started to finally say, thank goodness, you know, not about what happened, but that people
Right.
are finally willing to listen.
And are you finding that it's that the top down, it has to come from the CEO rather than putting it over in HR and just hoping that it infiltrates up and down the organization? But if you can get it from the CEO, right, that's where maybe some priorities start being put into place.
That's it. You're exactly right, Sharon. I mean, you know, there's been a couple of groups that I work with, and it was my own experience, right, of having to start grassroots. That will only get you so far. If you can't get the leadership team on board, then you're not going to get the funding, you're not going to get the resources, you're not going to get that leadership to really guide something like the DE&I journey that is quite hard to take in an organization. So, yeah. Sure, yeah. Bias, conscious, otherwise. And Sharon, I will say, you know, I was thinking about, so I'm going to show what people do well, right? What the companies do well here in a second. But I was thinking about sort of that inflection point that you just brought up. And it's interesting because there are still businesses that are not doing anything. And, you know, it's consistent. And I've gone to different people, and typically I'll hear from their employees, right? And these are kind of the things that continue to come up where I'm just like, wow, you know, you would think that going back to those stats, people would just get it.
Yeah, there's a strong business case for the ROI of DEI.
Right.
A plus B equals C.
And it's not new. I was telling somebody one day, I said, my goodness, even if you don't care about the social justice aspect of this and the human aspect of this, then just care about the business aspect of it, right? I mean, now you got to be genuine, right? You know, people will understand if their businesses are checking the box and things like that. But I think that you can at least get momentum to where you start to maybe have the empathy to start to understand, okay, now my heart is following my business mind here. But yeah, it still baffles me.
Yeah.
And this is Carlitha. Sharon, to your point, absolutely, it's got to be top down. But sometimes even it takes that issue being brought up at the board level, you know, from the many business entities that are represented on a corporate board, bringing it up because they're doing some things in their organizations, and if they're sitting on the board, they're wondering, where are you in this particular conversation? So, you know, sometimes it's not even that it's springing forth from the that second level, the senior managers. But it's got to be driven even higher than the CEO, because sometimes the CEO isn't convinced until somebody at the board level says, we need to be doing more. We need to look at this issue a little bit more intensely. So yeah, driving it to the highest level and bringing it down is certainly where the change you'll see that change coming.
And Carlitha, I want to add to that. You know, when the George Floyd murder occurred last year, I was in divinity school, and our teacher we had a class that next day. She said nothing about it. She just went over it. And, you know, my classmates was like, okay, but we got to write a paper on injustice. And she just went right over it. And I've shared this with Jay. Yeah. And I ended up talking to her about a project. And I said, can I change my project to what is going on in the world now? And the light bulb came on to her. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything to the class. And she came back and apologized, and the school had a big forum, and she said it was because white privilege, and I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And that's how the discussions really started over at the university.
Right.
Yeah. I love the storytelling, right? I mean, that's how we meet each other as humans. That's how we start to really understand how things impact one another. And, it just takes somebody else having that empathetic ear and an open mind to be able to really kind of move the needle in this journey.
Hey, Jay, this is Becky. I wanted to throw in one other piece when I've talked to some of the business leaders that are recognize that they need to do something. And one of the pieces that I think is hard for them to talk about is it's really uncomfortable, especially if you are a white male and have never really been exposed to these topics. And there's a sense of fear of, am I opening Pandora's box? What kind of culture am I going to create? What kind of conversations are we going to have? Is this going to distract people from doing the job? And I think that's just the reality. And, the more that DEI leaders can kind of talk about that reality and find a path into this that is business focused and accomplishes the really important objectives, it will make it easier for business leaders to see that path, see that roadmap, and feel comfortable stepping in. And I think that's a big barrier that I've noticed.
It's the number one, Becky. It's that I'm uncomfortable. And I and that's what that first bullet was kind of, alluding to, is that they don't really know where to start. It's uncomfortable. And so kind of apathy starts to set in. I've had some that have said, it's not only uncomfortable for me, but what about my clients? If I take this strong stance on, say, Black Lives Matter, will I lose client? What does that mean? And so that could have a business impact. So it is a fearful step for most people. And to your point, probably, except for one person, all of my clients are white males. But they're all ones that said, I'm uncomfortable, to your point, but we've got to do something. Can you help guide me in these discussions? I mean, I think about 2 weeks ago, I was on spring break. I was heading to the beach and I get this frantic text. I'm getting ready to have a town hall. We'd like to share the some of the diversity numbers with the team. What do I call non-white? I'm scared to death. I have non-white in my notes right now. What do I call that? And I said, minority groups in the organization, right? Like you're not clicking down into different groups, minority groups, ethnic groups. And so I was giving them some things, but there was real genuine fear there about having that town hall. And that's why you want to seek out a guide and somebody that can help you find your way. I'm going to go through these pretty quick because we've talked quite a bit about them. So it is embracing that ambiguity and leaning in and seeking to understand and help. One of my clients is somebody who just said, I just want to talk through what happened. This is right after George Floyd. What happened? How did you feel? Everything else, and I'm seeking to understand. I hope I don't cross a line. And I told them there's no line to cross. Speak your mind. You are being a sponge right now. There's nothing you can do that would wreck this. I welcome this. They're very mission driven. A lot of the people that I'm working with, they're fearful, but once they know that they have a guide, that they have people that can help support them, then they make it a top priority. And Sharon and Carlitha, that goes back to that whole notion of whether it's the board or the C-suite or whatever that, influential level of leadership is, they make it a part of their mission. They gain alignment at their leadership level, they commit to investment, and then they accept that this is not a check the box and something that's going to turn around in 6 months to a year. This is something that's going to take 3, 5, 10 years, depending on where your company is. You have to be, very intentional, right, about the steps that you take. And then I just wanted to share some of these best practices. And then this is really kind of it for the sort of formal blast you with slides part of the presentation. So critical best practices, and of course, there is a ton of detail behind all of these areas. And one of the things that we use is a maturity model. So we figure out where people are kind of in their DE&I journey, and then we take them through a plan that'll get them to where it's sustainable part of their culture. It's just the way it's embedded. But getting that leadership alignment and buy-in, we've talked about that. Structure, you know, I have some clients that are a little worried about, you know, starting, you know, different groups, you know, putting some heavy structure. They worry that that's going to come across as a program and heavy-handed. But if you don't have governance and you don't have a steering committee, I mean, we're all business leaders here. We understand that, you know, if you don't have that, then you're going to really struggle. Developing your roadmap and your strategy, assessing where your organization is, to me, is critical. We always, unless there's data that they've already done a survey or something like that, we do a DE&I and belonging survey, because you need a temperature check to see where you're at. And some want to push back a little bit because I think they're fearful of where they're at. And I'll say, it's okay. You know, we just know how long this journey is going to be, but we need to know where the journey has to start. Establishing those goals and milestones, and then implementing your plan, and then it's just a revision and adjustment, and being okay with missteps, being okay. People are going to push back. You know, people are going to have different opinions. People are going to be controversial on some of the things that they're going to bring up. You may have a customer that's going to come say, hey, I saw your diversity statement and I'm not in line with that. I've said, is that really somebody that you want to have and support? You know, so just be ready for that journey. And again, I wanted to make this conversational. So that was the information that I wanted to share. You know, I was hoping maybe there's a couple of nuggets in there that if you're talking with fellow, you know, business owners, or, you know, you hear somewhere where people are struggling, and you hear, hey, maybe they're here in their journey, or they're fearful, that this might trigger a couple things where you can help guide them, or, you know, kind of talk them through their journey, you know, and certainly, you know, can share my information. This is not a shameless plug. I do a ton of volunteer work. Carnella knows that. I work with women and minority business owners as a volunteer through Shaw, through SCORE. Some of my clients, I've organized some of their DE&I initiatives to also bring their resources forward, lawyers, accountants, you name it. So I spend a lot of time. My wife actually gets on me all the time. She's like, hey, you're starting to volunteer more than work on your business. Like, you know, work on your business. But again, you know, if I'm ever able to answer anybody's questions or help them out, then, you know, it's just moving our society forward.
Jay, I have a question. This is Becky.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when it comes to building awareness, I noticed, sorry, I'll turn on my video. I noticed that in some of the training topics, there's a sense of, where do we start, right? Where do we start this journey? Part of it is understanding the maturity model and the survey pieces, but I've noticed that for many leaders, you almost have to start with the leadership team and work with them on training, because until they actually understand it from a business perspective, from a human perspective, they're not open to prioritizing. They're not fully bought in. And frankly, they can become, you know, detractors along the line. So what topics, what areas of focus have you noticed are most effective, particularly for getting leadership teams on board and prepared and ready for this journey before you start kind of educating the teams and creating that new language?
We actually start with self-awareness. Sometimes we'll do that through we have a pretty quick, like, kind of behavioral assessment that we do. We'll sit down and do like sensing sessions. We'll do one-on-one interviews and really try to understand where people are individually, and then start to kind of unlock each person's mind at that leadership level. Then we'll bring them together. We like to do an exercise where we say, look, you know, this is actually the time that you can write stereotypes. It's uncomfortable. All this training is uncomfortable for when you first start, right? And you kind of go around the room and you have different groups and you say, you know, what's the stereotype that you've thought about or said or believe, and write that down. And then we kind of walk them through all of that. And when we're done, we'll say, stand with the group that you're most comfortable with. And interestingly enough, you know, you'll see like a lot of white males will be clustered over by the white male group. And, you know, and you see all of this, and then we'll come together in the middle and we'll say, let's go through the kind of the different things that we've written down and think about, you know, some of it, the absurdity of some of it, where does this come from? And it's all about opening up. So we start with self, and then we get them together as a group to then open up as a group. What we tend to find, I like to keep things a balance of humor, reality, light, but also we're on a mission, right? So it's kind of taking them through those different steps that it's okay, this is heavy, but let's get it out there. And then from there, we'll kind of assess. I mean, always I start with inclusion first. You know, it's DE&I, but I think we know that if you were to bring a diverse group into an organization and you're not inclusive, or they don't feel like they're belonging, or that you don't have the equity piece in there, then you're going to have higher turnover, and it's actually going to ruin your diversity program, because that word gets out. So we always start with that inclusion training. You know, one of the things that I will say has happened after the George Floyd murder was, and maybe all of us are experiencing this, you're bombarded with diversity stuff like LinkedIn. All of a sudden coaches came out of nowhere, training came out of nowhere, there's talks, you know, and everything else. You know, one of the things that we face is people say, oh, okay, can you just do inclusion training with our leadership team, and then, you know, that's it. So, no, we're not. If you want that, go there. We're talking about the journey, right? And so we really identify what are those gaps, train to those gaps. And then, yeah, you're right. I mean, once then, as part of your strategy, then you figure out how you're going to roll it out across the organization. We always encourage people to share the survey results. One of the things I know I always hated is when I did a survey and then never saw anything out of it, you know? And so we, you know, preach transparency. So we start with that so that the rest of the organization is prepared for what's coming. They understand the why behind what's coming. And it's not just a program.
I love it. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding business owners. Small businesses have struggled with this topic because we see it more from a corporate, large organization. What advice would you give a small business owner that's looking to expand and know that whoever they hire, whether the person is African American, Asian, whatever, they got to have something in place?
Have something in place as in?
Meaning some type of, for lack of a better word, program. HR type, right, policy, that they're more open, and hopefully they will be in that just a policy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I've worked with small businesses too. And, you know, one of the things that we work on is, what is your diversity mission? What is your statement? I mean, I know that sounds very, you know, cliche, but you need to have it, because as you're recruiting, people are looking at that. One of the things that we teach is generations in the workplace and how to get synergy across all the generations, right? Well, if you think about the newer generations coming into organizations, they're actually demanding that you have two things: sustainability and diversity. If you don't have that, then they're likely going to go to the company that does, or leave you for a company that does. And so that's where we'll say this is important. Even if you are, say you're a small business and you haven't hit that inflection point even yet of, say, second stage, it's still good to go ahead and start to lay the groundwork for your beliefs and everything else, because you're still in that foundational point, right, of business ownership. And so establish that foundation at that point, because then you'll be able to grow it from that point, and it's going to be in your culture, particularly if you're starting that early. And so I think that's absolutely critical. And I think kind of related to that, Renee, I just saw your question that you had around pipeline in diverse. And I work with a couple of recruiting companies where they are struggling with that. Some of the recruiting companies themselves aren't doing a very good job about being educated on diversity, the business case of diversity, having their own statements or having their own programs. So some of the companies that I'm working with today are some of the bigger recruiting either software or firms to help them establish their own knowledge and their own ability to guide their clients, right? So when a client calls in and they don't mention anything around diversity, and they'll say, you know, do you want a diverse slate? Because, you know, here's the power of having a diverse slate. Well, you know, it'll be a diverse slate that meets the requirements that you need. We're training them a lot of times on responding to, I need culture fit. No, what you need is culture add. You know, a lot of times when we're saying culture fit, we're saying we want people like us. Well, you know, I don't want that personally in my organization. I want people that can round me out and be a complete 360, right? So, so we train them on that culture add instead of culture fit. And so it is a big struggle right now, whether it's a recruiter that's within an organization and their HR, or it's a recruiting company. But that's where, for us personally, that's where we're working with them on to get that diversity. The other thing too is going to the source. Some of them, you know, I've talked to one company, they don't have any Hispanics in their entire company. And, you know, we've talked about, hey, let's reach out to UTEP. Let's reach out to some, you know, Hispanic heavy universities that have the degrees that then have those transferable skills to get into your organization. Do you have early in career programs? Do you have a meaningful internship program? Let's go to the HBCUs. Let's, you know, if you're looking for women, like go, you know, connect with women's networking groups, right? Like go to the source. And that's where kind of that whole piece of this takes work and you have to be proactive comes into play.
You know, I noticed that's particularly meaningful for smaller teams where you maybe have one HR leader and I'll say excuse, but that's probably a little bit stronger than what I'm looking for. But the reason they give is, well, I just can't find anyone. And I think the reality is what they're trying to say is, with everything else I have going on, carving out time to be strategic and looking for those groups and making the connections. And I'm just one guy. I'm just one person. I'm just, you know, so I do think there's a lot of potential in helping make those connections and build those relationships with just different sources of really talented candidates, because they're out there. But if you keep looking in the same place, you're going to keep getting the same people you've always gotten.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. You know, going back, Roche was a formation for me, because once they finally realized the diversity, you know, the power of diversity, I was still the head of sales for North America, but I was, you know, tapped as the diversity person, which we tend to find, right? You know, and it's usually going to come from HR. But they brought in consultants and great advisors. And I told them, I'm a sponge, just, you know, let me be a sponge, let me learn. And a lot of them, you know, as we were talking, you know, I was talking about veterans, you know, we're talking about why do we not have a lot of veterans in the organization? And when we do, they were only hiring them for manufacturing. I'm like, you know, the government spent $250,000 plus on my leadership development. And then I led for 10 years in the most extreme environments. Like, these are people that, you know, are manager and director level, like immediately, right? You just teach them the business and they can learn that. And, you know, it was, well, we don't go to the bases. We don't work with the recruiters that work with military. We don't do. So that was one of the things that we really did. It was just that education, you know, to where to find them. And Becky, you know, I will say, like with smaller companies, you're right. You mentioned the one person, you know, I certainly know what that's like. I have a small team, but you know, one person for a long time, and you know, you're the marketer one day, the next day you're the accountant, and then, you know, you're a speaker, right? You know, so, you know, how am I going to start to build that recruiting? That's why I love these networking groups. That's why I gravitate towards them, because this is where I think some of that power can happen. Because even though we might be business owners, we know people and we know connected groups, and we can use, and this is why I say privilege, like we can use our privilege, right, of access to help people build their pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Jay, this has been really fantastic. Great information. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I love the interaction. I love the questions. So
Jay, I'm reminded of a podcast that we did recently, and I won't mention the company's name, but it goes back to what Becky said. And the person was saying how their organization hires IT is typically Asian.
oh yeah.
And that's how they viewed it.
Yeah.
And how other groups was they didn't say this, but I've known from the past that certain organizations, manufacturing is African American, and certain things, yes, the stereotype exists.
African American, Hispanic.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, when I was in Denver, I was working with a client that's a manufacturer. You walked into the C-suite, and they're all white males. And but they're ones that are saying we want to change this dynamic. And we went and I toured their facility, and it was African American and Latino in the warehouse, except for the supervisor. Their IT department was they were from India, and their overseas manufacturing consultant was from China. So it was like we were laughing. We were like, "This is kind of like your classical silos, like your stereotypes." But let's do some things to where we can start to cross pollinate, right? Like how much talent is actually sitting in your warehouse right now?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have people over there that you can unlock their potential and bring them over here to the head shed? And that's where for me, at least in their situation, they are already diverse. So how do we mix that up? They had the women were in sales, right? I'm like, okay, well, let's get some of the women in this meeting. So we brought up some women. I'm like, we need gender and ethnic diversity conversations here. I'm certainly not going to represent that well, right? So let's get the representation in the room. So yeah, I think, Carnella, one of the things that I've heard very similar to that, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but was from somebody who was from India and said, flip this if you want to test this. So if, and they were in an IT company, and they said, so that mean that, white people are not qualified, so I'm not going to hire any white people into my IT department? It's just this whole kind of notion of flipping things around. And like people were bristling like, well, how can you say that? He's like,
right.
That's what I hear. So.
And I think too, that just made me think about boards, when selecting boards, it is so important for women, business owners,
yes,
and women, period, to join boards. Because I know from my corporate days, I would go to different events representing the company, and I would walk in, and first I'm African American and I'm a woman, and I walk in and I'm like, wow, again, here I go. I would go to IT meetings, and I walk in and I'm the only African American and I'm the only woman. And so I would love to see a shift all around, but I would love to see more women on boards. I mean, it's a slow progress. I've seen some shifts on some of the boards in the Raleigh-Durham area, but we still have a long ways to go.
Big time. And I think UNC has something. A lot of universities who have connections with corporations are starting to say, we have a diverse population, and we want to put some of the people that are in our network and our alumni, diverse alumni, into your boards for paid positions. Because one of the things too is it should be a paid position, right? I mean, I know a lot of us might be on boards that aren't, or maybe they're in like networking groups, and things like that. But let's talk about equity, right? Like if you want to put me on a board and it's a P&G, then, let's get some equity in there. And I think that a lot of universities are really starting to help move that way. Other companies, I was actually, thanks to Annette, I was invited to a minority sourcing conference the other day, and a lot of Fortune 500 companies were there where, you know, they're also looking for boards and things like that as well. So we need that. You're right. And even in my situation, when I walk in to a board, you know, Cornell, it's going to be even probably a little different for, you know, you guys here, right? Because yeah, I might be a black guy walking in is what people see. But to your point, you know, woman, by the way, when we did that exercise, I always ended up with the women, because I guess I always felt like there's more of a shared experience in corporate, maybe in corporate. And I don't know if that's ignorance or bias on my end, but I always just kind of felt like when I walked into a room, like I knew I was getting paid less than my counterparts. I knew, like, I just knew there was some differences there in kind of the equity piece and equality. So, but I do think that it's important. If you don't have the representation, how are you going to really meet your customer? How are you going to find the innovation?
Right. Jay, it's a few questions in the chat. I think you
Okay.
kind of answered some of them.
Let's see here.
I think Annette had a question.
How do yeah. So Annette, how do you help companies that have leaders who suggest diversity and social justice issues are too political, perhaps not safe for the environment? You know, this is one of those things where, you know, I guess fortunately now, if you're not making a statement or you're not, and it's meaningful, and you're not doing something, then you're now starting to become the outlier. And so one of the things that we'll start with was not only that piece, right, but more so, I mean, we're employee focused. So, you know, how many of your employees are waiting for you to take a stance and you're not doing anything? Are you going to lose? We had somebody that we were talking to kind of in sort of that discovery phase. And they're the one, you know, one of the ones that said, well, our clients may not, you know, approve of this. And they listed off their clients. And I was like, these are major RTP, North Carolina and South Carolina company. Like, have you looked at their site? They have their, you know, comments, right? Like, let's do a little work here. You know, and then we did a kind of a employee engagement survey, D&I survey. And we showed them, we were like, this is what your employees are saying. They want something. You know, we clicked down into gender and ethnic groups and things like that. This is what, you know, George Floyd happened 2 months ago at that point. I'm like, you have not said one thing. Your African-American population is pretty upset here. And, you know, they ended up not wanting to do anything. And they've experienced extreme turnover. So, you know, we'll bring in examples like that, you know, just really explain, this is what happens if you don't do it. And now it's really become an expectation. And then going back to that generational piece too, as well. You know, I have a 17-year-old daughter. She's come out, and all her friends, they're demanding it. I mean, we're talking about a 17-year-old, right? They're like, we're going to go work at Chick-fil-A, right? I mean, but they're like, they're looking at sustainability, looking at everything else. So I've started early in career programs at different companies. And as you start recruiting in there, it's one of the things that you hear from a recruiting perspective. What's their sustainability? Do they have organizations and things like that?
Wow.
Yeah, Annette, you're right. So we actually just did a pretty big general engagement survey that I just was interested. I was listening to some leaders that were saying we have great engagement right now. You know, we've made it through COVID, like all this other stuff. Well, I knew what their employees were saying. And so it got me really curious to see what's the delta between what leaders think and what their employees are saying. So we did a survey around that. And that is one of the things that people were saying. We showed them that about, I don't want to butcher the numbers here, but it was a pretty significant number. So if it wasn't for COVID, then they would be gone. A larger number, I mean, a large number said, we're looking because companies are hiring right now and they are ramping up. So I think there is sort of that risk and you're always going to have people that are going to have that risk aversion and aren't going to speak up. You just have to try to find those that are receptive. And then maybe when you put the facts in front of them, it opens them up to understand there's a bigger fear of not doing something. Chezzy, I don't think I've heard of Chezzy.
You may actually, but they've had a recent name change.
Oh,
Jim. So, and I misspelled it. There needs to be an E on the end of that. So Chezzie. So Chezzy was founded by Tony Egbuna, who played for Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a really interesting organization. It goes into companies and it's like a portal where I think maybe the closest thing I could think of is that it's almost like Glassdoor, but specifically for people who want to know the culture and would you be a good fit? So they call it a diversity career platform. So you go to Chezzy. It was called something else before, but then there was a trademark issue, so they had to change the name. But if you are Latinx, for example, and you're looking to apply to IBM, you can go to their platform, look at it, and then find out what would it be like for me if I worked there as a Latinx community member?
Yeah.
Would I be the only in certain departments? Is there an ERG that I could interact with?
Yeah.
It's a really, really cool thing. They're working with Google, Deloitte, Facebook, Microsoft. I mean, he's got a lot of big companies that are interacting with this platform. And again, it's really, really cool. And in the recruitment and early career space, I think you would find it possibly helpful.
Yeah, that sounds great, Sharon. Thanks for sharing that with me because, I think it's one thing, like if you go to a Glassdoor, it's usually like complaints about leadership or pay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But people are really starting to get interested in all these other areas, right? And these other,
it's
aspects.
Super cool. And he and his sister is his co-founder and his CMO. Her name is Dumebi. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but Dumebi, and they live in Durham. So Tony was up in New York, but I think because of COVID, he may have returned to the Triangle area. But, you might want to connect with him because I think that would be a really cool way to, to help grow his business and his footprint, but also to help find talent and match them up to companies that are more progressive and are maybe further along, as you described, the maturity of the DEI journey.
Yes.
Maybe you don't want to go into a company that's so early that you don't want to be, that's a lot of work, right? So maybe you want to work for a company that's further along.
Right. No, that's great. And that's one of the reasons why I love these conversations. I always learn multiple things coming out of it and different viewpoints and things like that. And, just on the surface of hearing this, I'll check it out today. I mean, I always try to point resources to my clients or to people I'm just talking to. They don't have to be clients, the volunteers or just people that have questions. And kind of going back to Annette's question or the question around recruiting, it is a tough place. That is one of the areas, and it's one of the most critical places outside of the leadership is then how do you get this, diverse slate in front of people. So what are these tools that we can do? What's your rating on here? You don't want to have a bad rating, right? I mean, or if you have a great program, how do you get on there and attract, and let that be that multiplier to help you out. So thanks, Sharon.
Sure. And can I give you a couple of other fun things that is helpful too?
Yes, absolutely.
Because we know that DEI is so much more than just race and gender.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many more things. And they are my favorite client. It's a local company based in Durham, LCI, and a second company that's actually launched out of that called Abler, which is spelled ABLR. So LCI is the largest employer of Americans who are blind or low vision.
Mm-hmm.
And they have hundreds of employees and they make every single mattress for the US Navy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right there in Durham. It's incredible to tour their facility. But the statistics with disability employment is horrific. People don't want to give people with either a very visible or a non-visible disability a chance. And so you have these college graduates who sit there unemployed because people won't give them a chance. And so LCI, they have been providing, and a lot of it's in manufacturing and distribution, but the offshoot company, which launched last April, called Abler, and their website. Thank you, Emily. You're doing an awesome job putting all this in. Abler360.com. Their CEO, John Samuel, is now one of my most dear friends, personal hero, incredible human being. He went to NC State, didn't start losing his vision until he was in college. But what he's been able to do and conquer the world is nothing short of a full-fledged movie on his life that will be made one day. I mean, he's climbed Mount Kilimanjaro as a blind guy, built a $45 million telecommunications company in Africa without telling anyone he was blind. Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
Stories.
Oh, wow.
But what his mission, the subset mission that came out of LCI, because the knowledge economy is where business, enterprise, and opportunity is, because people with low vision use computers because there's so many wonderful accommodations like screen readers and all kinds of things. And there are jobs that they can perform if people just knew about it. And so Abler has a three-pronged piece. We have digital accessibility, because guess what? Companies are getting sued if their web properties are not accessible. Beyonce, one of the most famous ones, got sued a couple of years ago because a fan tried to buy a ticket for her concert and could not, a blind fan could not navigate her website. Wow. Domino's Pizza. I mean, the list goes on and on, the number of national brands that are being sued left and right.
Yeah.
The second piece, it's not that hard to fix the accessibility on your website or on your digital properties. It's not that big of a deal. And oh, by the way, if you fix it, your search engine optimization goes through the roof because it means you have a well-built website. But then the other piece is they're doing what's called Abler Works, which is workforce development for people with different varying abilities and disabilities. So mobility issues, neurodiversity, auditory, visual, cognitive. So there's all different, the umbrella that's defined by the ADA is large. However, they're a great community to get involved with. And Jay, with your work that you're doing in companies with DEI, they now, I helped them and I've actually narrated a lot of them. So just a plug in, they actually have a brand new online course.
Oh, that's great.
That people, that hiring managers, leaders, people who are interested in learning more on how they can connect with and utilize this talented part of our workforce that is being underutilized. So it's disability inclusion, the untapped talent network. And so if you go to abler360.com, you'll see it. And so I would encourage you all to, take a look at that.
Sharon, thanks for sharing that. So one thing is, being in the military, everything I slept on and sat in was created by the Industries of the Blind, and I loved it. Loved that mission. The other thing is, I'm always a sponge, right? And so I never thought that I would start a podcast, and Carnella helped direct me and how to get it going. But people were asking me my viewpoints, like right after George Floyd, right? And I was like, well, you're going to get it, but I have my own biases. So, this is my viewpoint. You should seek out other people. And they're saying, well, I can't really be as transparent with other people and I feel like I can ask questions. So again, kind of going back to some of that fear, this wasn't clients, this was friends and people that I just knew. And so I said, well, maybe I know a lot of diverse voices, so I'll try to bring those to you. One of the people that I connected with, and then we just instantly, I don't know, she's starting her business, and I'm just like, you got to do this, was around neurodiversity and disabilities. Her son has autism, and she realized how hard it was going to be. And so she made it her mission to educate people on neurodiversity. And, we talked about it on the podcast. And as I was learning about it on podcast, immediately I was like, I'll help you start your business. Like, I'll do all, like, this is a volunteer thing. Like, we've got to get this out there. It was such a huge learning point for me. And the other thing too is one of the reason why I left the military, I was going to be a lifer, is after Iraq. So I was there in 2003 for the invasion. When I came back, I was really lethargic, and I used to run marathons. I used to be the one that could, beat the 18-year-old out of boot camp and running. Like, I really wanted to be, not only just that thoughtful and humble leader, but also physically, I wanted to make sure that they knew that I would always be there for them. And I started not being able to keep up. And I went to the doctor, and first I thought, oh my gosh, I have some kind of PTSD, or is it some kind of fatigue or something? Or, we took, like, everybody's worried about the vaccine today. Listen, if you're in the military, they shoot you with stuff you don't know what it is. Like, I had like 8 shots before I went to Iraq. I was like, is it from this thing that's still blistered? It was diabetes. I got diagnosed with diabetes, and my dad has diabetes. My grandmother has diabetes. I'm like, Dad, of all things to pass along, why'd you pass along like this gene? I'm 5'7", you're 6'2". Like, could you have not like passed along that gene? But to the point of disabilities, my dad had about 10% vision at the time, and so the reason why I left the military is I thought I was going down that path. My grandmother had amputations. My dad was going blind. And so I was starting to prepare my life to be a disabled person. And fortunately, that's why I decided to get into the pharmaceutical and medical industry, and I went right into diabetes. And that's the reason why I stayed in diabetes, was to learn. And then when I learned, I wanted to educate. But Sharon, we have to support these organizations. We have to be thoughtful about this because it's out there. And even just thinking about the population of people with diabetes, I mean, neuropathy,
yes, all of that. And think about, I assume that you've probably heard, especially having worked in healthcare, the silver tsunami.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
The amount of people turning 65 and older every single day in the United States such a huge population. So, and with age, our sight, our hearing, our mobility. So you may not have been born with a disability, but you could have an age-related acquisition of a disability that, and guess what? My mom, she's got macular degeneration. She's blind in one eye and losing the vision in her other eye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, just, it's necessary that we really make sure that we are providing resources so that everyone has the chance to get the content they need to live a quality life.
One of the things that I learned, we had somebody in our marketing department that was on the autistic spectrum. And when I always try to have like cross-function teams, even today, and I advocate this, to sit, and when I'm thinking about strategy or doing something, different viewpoints. I want people, right? And I always sought him out because he just saw angles I couldn't see. He saw angles that most people couldn't see. So I'd bring him into meetings, but I also know that, like, you couldn't put him in a small room with a lot of things going on, right? Well, he was instrumental in helping me build out a new strategy behind, one of our kind of revenue streams. And at our national sales meeting, I was working with the company that helped us, with the production and all of that. And it used to be loud music and pump up the salespeople, all this other stuff. And again, kind of going back to being able to wearing the other hat of diversity, I went to one of the consultants I was working with, and I said, hey, I have this person. I want to highlight the work that they did. It was really their brainchild. So how do we do that? And so we worked with the company. We lowered the lights. We did soft music. Instead of having everybody row, we did, different types of seating so that it wasn't as intense when you're standing on the stage. We worked the stage differently. And then we had a quiet area. And we did this for the entire organization. We brought in wellness people. We had quiet rooms. We had rooms where if you didn't feel like you wanted to be in the main stage area, you could watch remotely. And it was rated our best sales convention ever. And I think just thinking through that, if it wasn't for him, interactions with him and trying to be thoughtful about him, I never would have thought about that. And what really saddened me was that everybody needs to have, his name is Rick. Everybody needs to have a Rick on their team. Unfortunately, Rick is probably going to work for a nonprofit, right? Or, I mean, this, until we can surface this, then we can get Rick those the Ricks of the world, those opportunities to thrive and shine.
That's awesome, Jay. I just put in the chat this statement that John Samuel uses in every speech he gives: proximity builds empathy.
Right.
And do you know Danielle Pavlov at SAS?
I know the name, yeah. And as a matter of fact, I was going to share before we're done. Annette, who's on, graciously through the NC Education Lottery is sponsoring a series of diversity talks. This was something that we had just kind of been thinking, really to try to unlock some of these companies that are stuck and some of these leaders that are stuck. We wanted to try to provide a platform to really get them the education that they need to either get unstuck or even start to move down their own path. And one of the speakers is from SAS. So I'll share that before we come off. But it's not her who's going to be.
She runs an internship bringing in people with autism to come work at SAS. It's an incredible program.
That's
awesome. Awesome. Jay, I just put a question in, and we've recently seen this in the news in North Carolina. The couple, same sex, and the photographer turned them down because of their belief. And then there was another story right before that. How are you advising, or what would you say to a business owner that says their belief is not in line with my beliefs? I mean, when we talked on our podcast, we talked about Hobby Lobby and we talked about Chick-fil-A. You know, they're big corporations. How would you address it with a small business owner?
First, I would take a very deep breath because this is personal for me, right? Kind of going back to my daughter, we were in Indianapolis because of Roche for about 9 years. And we knew that she was gay. She hit a pretty big bout of depression, and I was already in the process of considering leaving this great job to follow my passion, but also move back here. My mom's side of the family's from Indiana. Side note, my great-grandfather was in the Klan, led the Klan in Indiana. So it is still very, there's certain areas you still can't go. They had a law that allowed businesses to be able to do this. And they had something where we had I think it was a cake, a same-sex couple wanted to go in and have a cake made, and they were kicked out and said, no, and you can't come in the property. The law, the governor at the time, it was Mike Pence, got on TV and said, yeah, I support this, is their right. Salesforce, Eli Lilly, Roche, a bunch of other companies made statements, and they were like, we may actually consider starting to pull out of the state. At that time, then all of a sudden the governor and others started saying like, well, let's talk about individual freedom. I mean, and then it just went down like this kind of convoluted political thing. But I remember when that happened, and I remember kind of what with my daughter's kind of psyche and what that did for her. Like, she couldn't come out there. So I've had to take a big breath and then put my advisor hat on and say, if that's going to be part of your business plan, then expect that you're going to have, you're going to exclude people. It's a risk. If that's a risk you're willing to take in your business, then just know that it's a risk. You know, unfortunately, that cake company, they had the opposite. I mean, there's a lot of people that supported them. So as people were protesting, counter protesters came, and they actually started increasing their sales because they were attracting another type, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say with somebody's business, you know, I mean, how that's gonna impact them. I would just let them know that there will potentially be an impact. And then quite frankly, for me personally, I've not worked with people because of their policies. I didn't do this for money, right? You know, I mean, I have to pay my bills. Like, I'm running a company. We're all small business owners here, right? But it's more about the passion and mission. So they'd probably need, they'd be working with another consultant from then on as well. I wouldn't be able to look at my daughter and say, I'm working with this company that excludes, you know, people.
Right.
You know, my grandfather, who was white, who came up through the Klan, and my black grandfather both served in World War II. You know, my white grandfather, who is now very anti-racist, was happy that he was a radar tech because black people couldn't come onto that deck. So, you know, my own personal story won't allow me to work with folks like that.
And I think too, we can see what has happened to North Carolina. A lot of companies pulled out of North Carolina when we had the, you know, the issue with the bathrooms. I mean, North Carolina lost a lot of business. I think we're starting to recover from it, but that was a big issue, and it put us in a map in ways that we didn't want to be on the map.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Going back to Sharon's statement, the proximity builds empathy. Before I do bail on somebody, I do my best to try to unlock them. And so that would be one where I would try to see if they'd be willing to sit down, you know, and that's say in that situation with an LGBT person, you know, the community, somebody from the community that I could bring in who I know is savvy, right, in those conversations to be able to try to create that proximity. That is, I love that statement because that is the truth. You know, once you think about yourself and your own biases and you're okay with understanding, man, I got biases. We all do. What shaped them? You know, and can I ratchet up that empathy level? Then you can start to have that proximity, and that's that whole exercise, right? What are the stereotypes? Now we can sit here and we can see the ridiculousness of them and the power of us as a group. So I would hope that maybe they would at least be able to take that opportunity to sit down and talk with somebody.
Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful. Are there any other questions for Jay? Jay, you want to put up your the event over at with Education Lottery and Annette for those that, you know, would be able to attend?
Yeah, and you won't have to listen to me. I'm you know, just guiding the panel. Really, the whole point of this was, like I said, to try to unlock some folks, or, you know, help people who are, you know, heavy into diversity and are struggling. You know, it has been, particularly with small businesses, it does tend to be with either the business owner or maybe if they have an HR and they've said to the HR, this is something that you need to focus on. And there's not a lot of resources. So one of the things that we wanted to do was figure out a way to get resources to people who maybe didn't have access to resources. They couldn't bring in a consultant. You know, is this a way? And again, you know, Annette really pulled through with the sponsorship to help us be able to do that and bring different voices in, different viewpoints.
Emily, you're probably better at this than me, or Elena in the background. Someone was asking how to copy, cut and paste. I know you can copy. I usually copy mine, but can you remind me or remind us how to save the chat? Because there's a lot of good information in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
There are two options. You can click the three dots at the bottom that say save chat.
See, I
and
never
that'll
have the three
download
dots.
it to your computer. Or if you click and highlight like that last thing that Annette just posted, and then hold down the shift button, scroll to the top and click down at the top, then you can select all. Or you could do, well, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC, you could do Command A to select all and copy the content and paste it wherever you want to paste it. Sometimes I just paste it into the calendar event, like the notes section of the calendar event. But if you want to download it, it's those 3 dots at the bottom.
There you go.
Okay, and admin said they just shared the file in the meeting. Okay, awesome. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, have any more questions or anything, I mean, I am happy to continue to chat and help out in any way possible.
This was a great discussion. Thanks, Jay. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you guys for the questions and the input.
Thank you so much.
Yes, and we do the replay, so you never know, you may get some additional questions from the replay. But this was good. This was really good. And Jay, we thank you for your time. And Jay also supported us with the installation dinner. He was one of our supporters. So he's an unofficial NABRO. So we just
Do
keep.
you want to put your website information or any contact information in the chat? That way
Sure.
people can know where to find you to do business with you down the road.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes. So he's been in the back supporting us also. So we really grateful for what you're doing. And I want to end on this. Jay, can you share? I know the story, but I want to share it with everybody because we talk about shifting and pivoting. You want to share a little bit what happened before we wrap up, and maybe this will inspire a business owner to hang in there.
Just share some inspirational.
Yeah, you remember when you shifted, you were working on something else, and this whole DE&I was like the thing that you needed to focus on.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like I said, it was really disheartening, right? When I was trying to talk about the power of diversity to people and they wouldn't listen. So for me, I was less than a year in when COVID hit of hanging my shingle. Luckily I had a couple of, good clients, and, they hung in there and we were able to do that. But I had 11 speaking engagements set up at different conferences and different companies and things. And of course that ended. And so not only with COVID, the quick pivot that I had to do was, once those were canceled, was try to take things online, try to get comfortable doing things on video, everything else, and really change to a digital kind of campaign, so to speak, in engagement. But then also very quickly, then you had the social injustice, kind of one after another, right? Things happening. And so again, with people then sparking interest in that area, I had put that information to the side. I was so disheartened that, building programs and building workshops and things. I mean, one of the things, I took everything that I developed at Roche and I brought with me, but, really being able to repurpose it for, small, medium-sized businesses was a pretty big work set. But with that, it allowed me to free up the time that I wasn't going to be in a plane, that I wasn't going to be in hotels, that I wasn't going to be traveling, and all the fatigue that comes with that. And it allowed me to really repurpose my time to focus on the diversity piece and really finally be able to meet, leaders where they were, where that came, and in a way that they were able to digest. But we had to get creative. I do a lot of things live. We used to do sensing sessions versus surveys and things like that, so I had to develop a survey and kind of find complementary tools. But yeah, I mean, as a small business owner, it's one of those things where I tell people, you can, and this kind of goes to transformational leadership that was embedded in me through the military, is, you're either heading to a storm, in a storm, or coming out of a storm. And so it's how you prepare is what's going to allow you to navigate that kind of continual journey as a small business owner. And so I was having to practice what I preached. We hit the storm, but luckily, just having that mentality and that ability to have, quick infrastructure changes helped out quite a bit.
Thank you. And we all have to go through the storm at some point in time, and the storm repeats some point in time, but we're all still here. And so that's a wonderful thing in itself. Wonderful. Well, I'm gonna end here, Jay. Thank you. Emily has 1 or 2 announcements, and then we're gonna close out.
I just want to get a couple of things on people's calendars and radars. The first being that as a NABO member, you are encouraged to register and attend our advocacy days coming up for National NABO. is coming up on June 7th and 8th. And it is virtual this year. Normally we would be traveling up to DC to meet with our elected officials, but NAWBO is a bipartisan organization, which means that we support legislation that would benefit women business owners, encouraging support from both sides of the aisle. And if we support legislation that is only backed by one, we recruit the other side before we vocalize our support of it. So this is our opportunity through Advocacy Days to share our stories, share our experiences, share our needs, so that our elected officials can act on our behalf, because we are their constituents. And this gives us a chance to make sure they understand what those needs are, so that they can develop legislation that makes it easier for us to start, run, and grow our businesses. So please take a moment to register for Advocacy Days coming up. And then also we have our Next Generation event for NAWBO Greater Raleigh coming up on May 6th, where members of our membership, as well as our business corporate partners, will be coaching young entrepreneurs on their pitches. All participating young entrepreneurs will be able to qualify for scholarship funds. We will be distributing $1,000 worth of scholarship funds to participants. And it's a great opportunity for people who are in high school and college who have either started a business or have a business idea to flesh that out and get it ready to make an impact. So if you know a young entrepreneur, please encourage them to apply. If you would like to be involved in the coaching, please reach out to Carnella.
So again, we're doing some wonderful things, and we are grateful for everyone. This is a team effort. We don't do it by ourselves. The board has to call on members. So thank you. And, you know, even I guess, Jay, you know, for helping us. So to everybody that's listening, feel free to reach out to Jay. Sharon, thank you. And we look forward to our next event, which is May.
Well, the Connections and Conversations will be the second Wednesday in May.
Yes.
And then our May luncheon and annual meeting will be on Wednesday, May 19th.
Yes. And our meeting in May the 19th is called Trade in All Your Hats for a Crown. So make sure we have a wonderful panel for that one too. So, and then that is our annual meeting, and my term is up. It's time for me to hand over to the next person, and Emily. So I'm looking forward to passing the torch. And I just want to thank you, everybody. So Emily, thank you for that part, because it was on my mind for those that I may not see before the next meeting. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your support. Thank you for all we've accomplished together. We have done this together, thriving. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, everyone, have a great rest of the afternoon, and we will see you at the May event.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.